G'day folks, Rod Moore from Learn to Paint Academy. Welcome to this week's Art Studio Chat. Now in this week's episode, I want to talk to you about preparing your own boards for painting on. Obviously there's lots of different surfaces that you could paint on, such as stretch canvas or loose canvas, but I think boards is one of the best ways for artists to get started painting and to really be able to practice for a couple of different reasons. First of all, they're cost effective, right? It's probably one of the cheapest surfaces that you can find to paint on, and you can save yourself a bit of money, especially during those early years when you're practicing a lot with your painting. So that's the first reason. The second reason is they're easier to store. Now, as you start to paint more and more, you will accumulate finished paintings. And if you only ever paint on stretch canvas, then what happens is typically you run out of storage space fairly quickly, right? Happens to all of us, and certainly happened to me. So that's why you might want to consider painting on a board. Okay, so this is a little one I did plain air. Pop it up that way. And it's painted on an MDF board. So what I want to do in this video is show you how to make and prepare your own boards for painting on. And it will save you a lot of money, and also much easier to store a little thin board than it is a thick stretch canvas. So it's definitely something to consider, and anybody pretty much can prepare their own canvas and their own board. It's not that difficult. So where do you start? Well, the first thing is you need to find a hardware store or a timber supply store that can provide you larger sheets of MDF board, right? So MDF board is medium density fiber board, or custom wood is another name for it, and depends on what country you're in as to what the technical term of it is, but it's a manufactured board, and it comes in sheets. So this one is 900 mil by 600 mil. Okay, in fact that's probably a pretty good size to paint on itself. You're not going to see it all in the shot here. You can see here I've been using this as an underlay for preparing other things, but this is 3 millimeters thick. You can see there how thick it is. It's not thick at all, but the beauty of this painting on boards like this is that when you buy frames that have those little pins in the back, this just slips straight in the back. You can put the pins down and you've got a frame finished painting very, very easily. Okay, so what I do is I go to my local hardware store in Australia, that's Bunnings, and I grab half a dozen sheets like this, and then they offer a cutting service where they cut them into the right size and shape for me. And then I just take all those pieces home. So I tell them what sizes I want. So usually I'll get a 16 by 20, or what's this one, an 8 by 14 inch. Okay, so you have to tell them what sizes. They won't know. And the one thing to be aware of is if you get somebody else to cut them for you in a hardware store or timber supplies, there's going to be a degree of inaccuracy. So if you want an 8 by 14 because you have a frame that's already 8 by 14, there's always a margin for error that they're going to cut it inaccurately. They're going to be out by a little bit, right? So I recommend you go and get boards cut, and then you buy a frame that's custom built for that size, and you can measure the exact measurements of it, and often it's out by a little bit, right? Sometimes it's out by a lot, so you don't go back to the people who are out by a lot. So how do we prepare these boards? And let's go and have a look at that. Okay, so if we have a look here, I've got boards here that have been cut to, 12 by 16. I've got a pile of them, and I want to prepare these. Okay, so I need to prepare both front and back. This is something that I didn't used to do, prepare front and back. I only ever prepared the front, and that's a mistake. So what we need to do is seal both sides of these boards, front and back. Okay, and to do that, I went down to my local hardware store again, and I spoke to the experts there, and I said, look, I need an underpaint, a sealer. I'm going to paint on MDF board. I need to seal the board, and they sold me a great big tin. Now, this is not a recommendation. You go and ask your local expert what they think you should use as a sealer for your MDF boards. Okay, so when we open it up there, you can see that it's just a tin of white paint basically. So there's different brushes you can use. I like these little sponge brushes for this type of application. So let me just grab one of those, and we'll pop the rest to one side. Okay, and all I do is just dip it in. Don't dip it in too far, and give that a coating of this. Doesn't have to be that thick. What I'm going to do is do both sides. So what I normally would do is do, half a dozen of these. I'll do one side, let it dry. Should be dry pretty quickly. And all I wanted to do is to seal the board. Stop moisture getting into it, etc. And we'll do both sides of that. Okay, and look, we're not here to paint a masterpiece because on the surface that we're going to paint on, I'm going to apply gesso as well. So this is just a sealer to seal this board. Same as what they'd use on any sort of timber walls, if you're getting your house renovated. Okay, so we'll just spread that out. Try and keep it even. And there we go. So I'm going to let that dry. I'll do both sides and then we'll come back after that's had a chance to dry off. Okay, well, I put the undercoat on the MDF board. Now, I've only done the top. Normally, I do the front and the back, but in the interest of time here today, I'll just do the front. But just one coat is all you need generally. And then what we will do is we'll now put a coat of gesso onto this board. So let me get that out of the way. And the gesso that I'm going to use here is a gesso primer. This is an Artilia one. I recommend a good quality gesso because this is the surface we're going to be applying paint to, and I think it's important that you do get a reasonably good quality gesso. So what we'll do is apply 2 coats of this. That'll give you the best possible results. I'm just trying to find a brush. Okay, now you can buy these hog hair bristle or natural fiber gesso brushes like this. They're really cheap to buy. And I find them really good because as you apply the paint, you can actually leave brush marks in the board or the surface. You can see it there. I'll just scoop it out, okay, and just put big blobs there, okay, like so. And you can, let me just turn that around that way so you can see it better. There we go. So as you apply it, you can put into the surface of the board marks, brush strokes and zigzags and things. And the reason why that's good is it gives you a rough surface, which helps you to create a really nice painterly effect on your boards. And it also acts like a tooth of a canvas. So when you're putting paint down, and you're just with a light, gentle touch, maybe you're putting some grasses down, the roughness of it will give you can see the way I'm zigzagging it across the board there, the roughness of those brush strokes in there will give you a broken effect of the paint, which can be really good for, as I said, creating a painterly type of effect on your boards or in your paintings. Okay, so if I let that dry, that's going to dry off to be a fairly textured surface in there. You can possibly see the brush marks and so on in the board there. But what I'd probably do is let that dry off fully and then put in another coat. So there'll be 3 coats on there. Now, some people will sand the board with a bit of sanding paper, just a very light grain sandpaper, before they apply that 3rd coat. I don't, but it probably is not a bad idea to do that. The other way that you can approach it is by using one of these sponge brushes that we used before. You can apply this gesso and you can smooth it out, and that will give you a much smoother surface. Okay, you can see that there. Okay, that will give me a much smoother surface to work on. And so if I'm doing really delicate, intricate work, then it might be preferable to have a smooth surface like that. However, the style of painting that I do, the Impressionist landscapes and seascapes, I do tend to like to have a little bit of a brush mark in there, a little bit of texture. And so I rough up the surface like that. And it gives you a lovely surface to then paint on when you come back to it there. Okay, so a bit random the way I do the strokes. Now, the question, of course, is will those tooth marks show through? And, I know that's a concern for some people. And sometimes they will. It depends on how much paint you put down there. If you only put a little bit of paint, very thin paint, then yeah, it may very well show through. But I don't actually mind that. If you use a lot of paint, use very thick paint, then no, it probably won't show through. So that's pretty much how I prepare the board. As I said, I'll let that board dry with that first coat of gesso, then I'll come back and I'll put a second coat of gesso on there usually. And I like the rough tooth mark or brush mark in there to give a bit of bite when I apply the paint. And you have to work out the way that you're going to enjoy painting on that surface. But it's certainly worth pursuing. Now, one of the challenges I had because I work on this backboard, particularly for filming, how am I going to support these on the backboard? You can see I put a little ledge there, but that's still a bit loose and a bit wobbly. So I went back to my high school days, and I used to have a fascination with blue tack, right? So now I've got some blue tack, which I'll just... So this is a little tip for those of you who maybe have a board like mine at the back that you want to work on. Okay, so I'll just pull some blue tack off. I'll show you how that looks in a sec. There you go, like so. Blue tack on the back of that board. And then I can just come and pop that on the backboard where I want it. I'll press it obviously a little bit tighter on there, but you can see there, that's now going to stay there beautifully and works really well. So I hope you've enjoyed today's Art Studio chat. It's just a good idea to get in the habit of preparing your own boards. That way you can have an endless supply of boards. What I tend to do, I'll just leave you with this thought, is I'll go to the hardware store and I'll get 100 pieces of board made up, and then I'll roll out some drop sheet in the garage here or even in the driveway. I'll get my big tin of underpaint and I'll just go bang and do all of the boards in one go, let them dry, turn them over, do the other side, let it dry, and then come back and do gesso, one coat, two coat. You can do all of that within a day, and then you'll have a nice big pile. Like I've got a big pile of the boards here, ready to go, and it's really super cheap, affordable. For under $100, you can end up with a big pile of boards and surfaces to paint on, and then you're ready to go. So definitely have a go at it, and let me know in the comments how you've gone preparing your own boards. Can be a little bit of trial and error, so don't give up after the first go. And I think you'll find that it's a great surface to work on. Hope that's helped. This has been Art Studio Chat with Rod Moore. I'll see you next week in Art Studio Chat. Cheers for now.